Alrighty everybody, there's a new MT09 out on the market. Well, it's not out on the market yet, it's going to come out, but you know what I mean. It's one of Yamaha's most beloved motorcycles. Their powerful 3-cylinder, motard, crazy wheelie machine thing, so they gotta get it right. And I'm coming to this video a little bit late because I wanted to make sure I got everybody's impressions first, and then I could then add in my own little spice and flavor to it later on. This motorcycle's caused a lot of division in the motorcycle community. If you look on any videos of it online, you'll see many comments of people being like, I love the looks, I hate the looks. Even on Yamaha's own video, they have a very split like to dislike ratio on it, so it's a very polarizing looking machine. But today I wanted to dig into the specs of this bike a little bit deeper, find out if Yamaha's made some meaningful changes to this machine, and just what I think of the looks in general, because I think a lot of people want to know if I like the motorcycle or not. So let's get into it today. Alright, so first of all, I'm actually a former FZ09 owner myself. I used to own a 2014 FZ09. It was a really fun machine. I liked cruising around town with it, popping little wheelies. It was a lot of fun to ride. It's a very torquey motorcycle, and it suits a street rider really, really well. I probably wouldn't own one nowadays just because it doesn't fit the kind of riding I like to do anymore, but I still think it's a really cool bike, and it's a really important motorcycle for Yamaha. They cannot screw this thing up. Their MT09 and MT07 line of bikes are very, very, very important. And looking at that like and dislike ratio that I was talking about earlier, you know, you might think that they made the motorcycle fatter or slower or worse or heavier or anything like that, but really it's all just about the look. So we're definitely going to get into that today, but let's look at the specs of this machine. So here's the important things to note. The bike's gone from an 847cc to an 890cc engine. That was done to make sure that the bike meets Euro 5 compliance. They wanted to make sure that it kept the same power output without being too restricted. It actually has a 4 horsepower increase at 118 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. It's got 68 foot-pounds of torque way down low in the rev range, so it's still that super torquey, wheelie happy machine we all come to know and love. It now features a 6-axis IMU derived from the R1, which is really cool, so you get more advanced traction control, more advanced, wheelie control, braking, a lot of different variables and data being collected by this little computer in the bike now. The front end forks are 41mm fully adjustable KYB forks, likely derived from the MT10. I don't think it's the same hardware as the MT10, but I think it's derived from it. Weight has been shed. It's 416 pounds, ready to ride. A big thing that Yamaha's talking about is that they've redesigned the intake, so you're gonna get more intake honk out of this motorcycle, which I do really enjoy. It's got an up and down quick shifter as standard, which is really cool. A new ride-by-wire throttle. Hopefully it's not a pure ride-by-wire, but it probably is. The gear ratio has been changed a little bit. Not that that bike needed any gear ratio changes at all, in my opinion. The braking system is the same one found in the MT10, which is awesome. I always found the brakes on the FZ09 and the MT09 platform to be lacking a little bit compared to competitors such as the Street Triple. It's got traction control, slide control, wheelie control, and it's basically the same setup as the MT10 in terms of the electronics and all that. It's got a 3.5-inch TFT, which is not that great. It's kind of small compared to the class. It's got LED lights front and rear, which is pretty cool, and it's got a very competitive price at $8,999, which is pretty awesome. So Yamaha has truly really revised this motorcycle. It's not a simple little dress-up game or some new plastics or a new light here and there. It's a pretty different bike. The engine's different, the electronics are different, the throttle by wire is different. A lot of stuff's different on this machine, and it really shows. So now I'm gonna talk about the looks because we have to talk about it. So it's a really polarizing model, but I really think that that's its number one strength. In this day and age, new bikes are coming out left and right. You gotta compete and stand out, and Yamaha, in my opinion, has taken a page out of the Tesla playbook and done something controversial enough to get people talking. The design ethos of this machine is coverless. Yamaha calls it a stripped back, super naked, raw beauty of the machine, and it's cyberpunk meets full functionality, and I honestly think they've knocked it out of the park when it comes to that design ethos. It's not meant to be some beautiful streamlined Ducati or some neo-retro from Triumph or Honda. Yamaha has decided that they are going to do their own thing, which I really appreciate. I think a lot of people right now are just taking playbooks out of either Honda or Triumph or KTM and trying to do things that kind of look like weird versions of other people's bikes. But a Yamaha looks like a Yamaha, and I like that a whole lot. It's meant to be futuristic, angry, angular, and just really cyberpunky and dystopian, which I really appreciate, and I'm personally a big fan of that aesthetic. In my opinion, those who complain that it's too ugly are kind of too concerned about the looks of a bike anyway. I guarantee you, if you swing a leg over this machine and ride it, you'll probably forget all about that. I personally really like the new Cyclops Y LED thing that they got going on. It's a really distinctive look, and I think it's just gonna be one of those things that's gonna take people some time to get used to, but then once they do, they're gonna forget they were ever polarized about it in the first place. I think one thing to think about is that people often identify themselves with their motorcycles. We attribute sort of either animalistic or humanistic qualities to them and really anthropomorphize our bikes and really form connections with them. So perhaps the reason why people are having a hard time connecting with the Yamaha is that it's very cold and machine-like and very raw and angular and mechanical, and maybe we feel like we can't form a bond with that, but I think it's just gonna take time. I really do like the looks of this machine, and I like what Yamaha's doing. So with all that being said, Yamaha is updating their bike to be in a market that is very competitive. This sort of 700 to 900 cc naked bike class is super competitive, and they sell a lot of these motorcycles. So let's take a look at the competition and see how the Yamaha is going to stack up. The first one I want to talk about is, of course, the Kawasaki Z900. It's the classic 4-cylinder competitor in this marketplace, in a market that actually doesn't have that many 4-cylinders left in it. It's got a TFT dash, lots of tech, a 948cc inline 4, which means that it technically makes more torque than the Yamaha, but it doesn't feel quite as torquey as that triple cylinder does. It doesn't have the same trickle-down tech the MT09 has from the MT10, because Kawasaki doesn't really have a hyper-naked MT10 sort of bike. The Z900 is sort of their answer to all of that stuff. Kawasaki doesn't sell you some Super Duke or MT10 or 210-esque motorcycle, so they don't have that kind of trickle down. But the Z900 is basically their hyper naked. It's got a lot of the same features and tech. It's very close in price. It's a slightly larger engine and one more cylinder. I think the Z900 should definitely be in your top consideration because it's a crazy good bang for buck kind of motorcycle, but I do think it lacks some of the panache and the character of an MT09. The other big elephant in the room is, of course, the KTM 890 and 790 Dukes. Now, the Dukes are really fun. We all know this. It has better components than the MT09. It's a bit more racetrack than street bike for the 890R. The 790 Duke, I don't think really competes with the MT09 right now, but the 890 does. However, the 890 is a whole lot more expensive than the MT09. You're going to be paying about $2,500 more to get the KTM 890R. A lot of people might tell you that it makes more torque, it's more fun to ride, it's a great motorcycle, but I really think that if price is a serious consideration of yours and you don't want to drop 5 figures on a motorcycle, the MT09 is probably going to be a better bet, but the KTM 890R is a really special motorcycle, really sweet bike, and should definitely be at the top of your consideration as well when looking at this category. It's got full rider modes, TFT, that sublime WP suspension up at the front. I actually have not ridden the 890R yet, but if it's anything like the other KTMs I've ridden, I'm sure it's a ton of fun, really easy to ride, really intuitive, and probably does wheelies on command. The last bike we're looking at today for competitors to the new MT09 is, of course, the Street Triple R and the RS. Now, this is the refined triple cylinder sport bike du jour. This bike's all about top-end rush as opposed to low-end grunt. It feels really nice and just refined and, you know, not as playful as you would like out of a motorcycle, at least in my opinion, but it still feels tremendously good to ride. Very few motorcycles in this category feel the way the Triple does on its side, and that's due to that Daytona-derived chassis that it has. Once you get the Triple leaned over in a corner, it just plants and sits so nicely. This was one of my big complaints with my FZ09 that I had. It really kind of pogo-sticked in the middle of a corner, and it just wasn't very intuitive to ride, but the Street Triple is just very, very good. However, it is more expensive. That's something you're gonna have to consider. It's a more serious bike. It's a bit more leaned over than the MT09. The Yamaha's always provided a bit more of a like stupid torque off the line grin factor than the Street Triple, but the Triumph's always going to have the build quality and refinement that you come to know and expect. I think you should definitely cross shop these two, but something tells me that if you're really into the aesthetic of the MT09, you might not vibe with the Street Triple, but the Street Triple is a really good motorcycle, like really, really good bike, and there's a reason that a lot of people who own them just sing their praises because they are very special. We actually gave one away earlier this year, so I've had a bit of seat time in it. I took it out to the track, really enjoyed it and used it, and it's a really, really good bike. So I'm gonna deliver you my final verdict here on the MT09. It's a very polarizing bike to look at, but I guarantee you it won't be polarizing once you swung a leg over and you're enjoying the awesome power it can deliver. I think Yamaha's done an awesome job positioning this bike in a totally different aesthetic mold than other bikes in the segment. And if you're an edgelord looking for a wheelie happy, stupid, fun bike to ride, this is probably the choice for you. I love the improvements that have been made to this machine on paper, and I think will surprise and delight those who ride and own it. I'm certainly looking forward to riding it myself. And yes, to reiterate, I really like the way it looks. It's cool and weird and different. And I think Yamaha's done a really, really good job on this bike. But it all comes down to the first ride, and I will definitely be trying to get my hands on one of them to show you guys what I think of it. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time. See you later. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Why don't you click this one right over here and you can keep watching some more of your sweet Papa Yam. Maybe this one will have fun memes in it. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe I crash a motorcycle. Who can say? Maybe you should click and find out.